So I don't know how it happened, but I completely slept on this plugin. When I first heard about it, it sounded amazing. It sounded like the best sidechain tool ever. But then I forgot to pick it up and I'm not quite sure why. And in the months after that, I kept reading reviews and they were all really good. They kept saying about how amazing the plugin was and people kept saying to me about how good the plugin was, and I kept forgetting to try it out. But today I want to fix that. Today I want to test it out. Now the plugin I'm talking about is called Trackspacer by Factory. Now this is a magic sidechain tool, and I call it magic because it's not really like normal sidechaining. Well, it is and it's not. It's taking it a step further. Usually when we do sidechaining, we're talking about sidechain compression, and usually with that we want to duck something under something else. So usually we'd have maybe a bass and a kick, and we want to duck that bass every time the kick hits, so those frequencies don't conflict with each other. Now with sidechain compression, we're just ducking the volume, so every time the kick hits, it kind of takes the volume down of the bass. But with Trackspacer, it actually ducks just the frequencies of the kick, so just the frequencies that actually conflict with the bass. You're left with everything else that doesn't conflict. Now that does sound kind of magic. Now, as I said, the reviews have been so good on this. I haven't found a bad review and they all recommend picking it up. So yeah, I can't wait to test this out. Now, if you haven't seen this series of videos before, I'm calling these Test Lab. This is where I take software and plugins and try them out on my own tracks. I want to see whether these plugins are something I'd use going forward. So that's what we're going to do today. This is not going to be a full-on review. I'm not going to go through every single feature and show you how it all works. We're just testing this out and I want to know whether this is something that's as magic as I think it's going to be. Okay, so let's try out this Trackspacer plugin, and to do that I've actually got my remix of Mark Cottrell's At Night, which is coming out really soon. And the reason I got this up is because I think there's a few layers in here that I could really use this plugin on. So here's a quick blast of how it all sounds. So the first thing I want to try this on is the bass, because obviously this is a sidechain compression style effect, and that's usually what you'd put sidechain compression on, the bass. You'd want to duck the bass from the kick so that those bass frequencies don't collide too much and cause an issue with the low end. So usually I don't tend to use sidechain compression to do this. I actually use LFOTool, which is actually a way of automating the volume levels. So rather than adding compression onto a bass, I'm actually just automating the volume levels, which hopefully is a little bit more transparent, which is why I like kind of doing it with that effect. So let me just solo the kick and the bass, and so you can hear how those sound together. So that's the bass with the LFO on. Let's turn it off so you can hear what it's like without. Now, because of the bass sound, it doesn't sound too bad. It works, but there's definitely some frequencies there that are conflicting a little bit. So let's try dropping this Trackspacer on and seeing what it can do. And I am using this on a demo because I want to see whether it's something that I want to invest in, whether it's going to work for what I need it to. So we've got this loaded up now, and as you can see, everything seems to be at its defaults. And the first thing I probably need to do is actually set up the sidechain, because I'm guessing this won't do anything without setting up the sidechain. Let's play this back and see if that's true. Yeah, of course it's true. It's doing nothing because there's no sidechain being sent to it. Now, there's nothing within the plugin to do that, so I'm assuming we'll do it through Ableton. So I'm going to select the input on the actual plugin itself to the kick, and then let's see what it does now. That looks really cool, actually. I didn't quite realize what it would actually be doing, but you could see there that line along the top, that kind of frequency analyzer, the blue one, is kind of showing the kick, all the frequencies that the kick is hitting. And that white line underneath is what the EQ is being done to that bass instrument. Now I can see the amount knob here is at 50%. I'm going to try just adjusting it and see if I can get a bit more of a subtle effect. So it really is knocking out a lot of that bass sound. Now, to my ears, that definitely works better. We're at about 20%. It says the ratio is 20%, and that kind of sounds better to my ears. You can still hear that kind of bass coming through, the sound coming through, but it's definitely knocking out those frequencies. Yeah, it's really crazy what it's actually doing. Now, it does have a low cut and a high cut. I'm guessing these are the frequencies that it's not going to touch. So if you put a high cut in there, it will kind of ignore those frequencies. That's what I'm guessing anyway. Let's have a look. Yeah, okay, that's kind of cool. Yeah, so it is literally like the high cut there are the frequencies that it's not actually going to do anything to. So that's really kind of handy. I think depending on the instrument, you might want to do that. Maybe if it's a bass with a lot of kind of high end energy, or an instrument with a lot of high end energy, then maybe you want to do that. That's quite interesting. We've got a freeze option here. I don't know what that could do. Ah, I get it. Yep. So this just kind of, it freezes that kind of EQ curve wherever it is at that point in time. So I suppose you've got to be really accurate if you're trying to hit that kick. Yeah, I suppose that could be an interesting thing. Yeah, see, I tried to grab it there right on the kick, and that was quite hard to do. I suppose depending on your latency, that might be harder and harder to do. But I suppose this is just one case. I'm using the kick, which is a really kind of short kick. But if you're kind of side chaining two things that are very much consistent kind of volume, then it's probably going to be easier to use the freeze. So maybe for the bass, you don't need to use that freeze function. There's also a little thing here, a little circle here. Yeah, so this is an advanced panel. Okay, so we've got a few different options within here. We've got the panning of it. We've got a different kind of mix. We've got the left-right mix and mid-side mix there. We've also got the attack and release on, I'm guessing that's on the compression, and then sidechain. I'm not even sure what option that is. I wonder if by default it's actually just EQing it, and then you can actually turn sidechain on as well. Okay, right. So that's just, if you turn that on, that's just going to give you the sidechain input. So it's basically just a way of kind of A being the input, maybe, I guess. You don't really want to be using that, to be honest. I think that's more of a kind of an A-B kind of thing. So yeah, I suppose that's kind of, it makes sense really. So how does that stack up against the LFOTool? I might just kind of go between the two and see how they both sound. You know what? I think I actually prefer that Trackspacer. That Trackspacer has a much kind of nicer effect to it. It's still giving me that kind of pumping kind of effect. I might have to kind of go through and put an analyzer on there just to see what it's kind of doing on that bottom end, how much of those frequencies is actually cutting out. In fact, let's do that now. I'm going to drop an EQ on here and see what it's actually doing after that. Get rid of this. I just want to analyze it. That does seem to be cutting some of that out. I think I'd probably have to bounce some of this just to kind of see exactly what it's doing. I'd love to see the waveform after this and see how much it's ducked it. But from my ears, I think that's sounding better. I like the sound of that Trackspacer. It works quite well. So that's it on the bass. I now want to try it with vocals actually. So sometimes kind of sidechain compression like this can work really nice on vocals. So say, for example, if you have some vocals and you might have a keys line or something like that, piano or whatever, then you might find that the two conflict a little bit. So you might want to kind of duck the keys, the pianos, the synths, whatever you've got, whenever you've got some vocal going on. So I'm going to see if we can do the same thing with this. So I've got a vocal layer here and a keys layer here. I'm actually going to try that Trackspacer on the keys. So that's how it sounds by default as I finish the remix. So let's get the plugin on there. Let's get this Trackspacer on that vocal channel. I'm wondering whether to do it after everything or before everything. I think after everything. Let's see how that sounds. This is only just kind of playing around, so it doesn't really matter too much at this stage, but probably in practice, I'd try both. So let's work the sidechain. So I want the sidechain to be the vocals. I want this keys to duck every time that it kind of hears some vocals. It's kind of interesting. It's a really kind of subtle effect unless you really kind of pump that ratio up. If you pump that ratio up, you almost lose those keys completely. So yeah, I'm not sure. Like I imagine it, by the looks of this kind of EQ graph going on here, it is actually taking down the EQ quite a bit, those conflicting frequencies. So it is, I suppose, giving some more space for the vocals. Maybe if I had a full vocal going throughout, like a proper verse chorus kind of thing, I might notice a bit more of a difference. Maybe this is just not the right track to kind of play around with, but it definitely is doing something. I think if this is used in kind of subtle amounts, you could see like on the bass, I was only using 20%. This is about 14%, 15%. Yeah, I think in subtle amounts, this could actually work out really well. So I'm really liking Trackspacer. I think it works really, really well. And actually it surprised me a bit because usually when a plugin has been overhyped or reviewed and like the reviews are all glowing, I almost kind of go in with this kind of dubious point of view where, oh, it can't be as good as they're saying it is. And you know what? I'm actually surprised because it is very, very good. It does a very good job. And actually so, I might actually replace LFO on my bass going forwards, which is something I never thought I'd say because I've been using LFOTool on my bass for years and years and years. But I think this actually works better than sidechain compression, or at least standard sidechain compression anyway. It has a nicer sound to it, rather than losing some of the dynamics of the bass sound. it works really, really well, especially in subtle amounts. Like the 50% default is way too much, certainly for me anyway. But around about 20%, it works really, really well. And I actually want to try it out on other stuff as well. Like you've seen, I tried it out with the vocals there, but I want to try out with a full vocal and see, you know, if I can kind of create some space in the piano or the pads or whatever to make that kind of vocal sit nicely. So yeah, it's something I'm definitely going to try going forward. And yeah, I think it might actually replace my standard bass sidechain, which is crazy. So yeah, if you want to try this out, I'm going to put a link down there in the description. There's a trial version over at Plugin Boutique, or you can buy it from there as well. I think they've got an offer on at the moment. Link is in the description, so if you want to check it out, you can do. Also, check out all the other videos on my channel. I've got loads more videos on different bits of software, plugins, hardware, all stuff that I test out in the studio and that I use within my own productions. And you can see how I use it and why I use it and everything else. So definitely check out my channel, see all the videos on there, get subscribed if you like it as well, hit that notification bell as well so you're notified the moment I upload a brand new video, and hopefully I'll see you again in the next video.